Hello, my name is Impazero, and I have a theory about one of Deltarune's most mysterious details that I'd like to share with you today. This theory is fairly simple, but I haven't seen anyone bring it up before. Please let me know if someone has already come up with this before. I'd hate to take credit for someone else's work. But I came up with this on my own, and I haven't been able to find it being discussed anywhere, so for the purposes of this video, I will be treating this theory as if it is a new idea. Again, let me know if I'm wrong, and I will 100% give credit to anyone who said this before. Now, let's get on to the actual theory. This is something I'm calling test run theory, and you'll see why soon. At this point, it's widely agreed upon that Kris is being controlled by us, the player, via the Red Soul. I don't have time to go into that in detail, so if you don't know that already, sorry. But the big elephant in the room when it comes to this idea is the birdcage in Kris's room. When interacting with it at the beginning of Chapter 1, it says, "It's a red wagon with a rusty birdcage in it. Looks like it's seen quite a few crashes." The carpet next to it is also stained with something red, presumably blood. Now, there is totally a chance that this actually means nothing. The comment about seeing quite a few crashes could actually just be referring to the wagon, not the birdcage, and the stain could be like, I don't know, jelly or something. I really wouldn't put it past Toby Fox, considering the way that Chapter 1's cliffhanger ended up, just being a big joke. However, we have no way of knowing if this is important or not yet. But this text, if interpreted in the way many have, seems to imply that Kris has ripped out their soul and thrown it into this birdcage before Chapter 1, aka before we even got here. And this is a flimsier point, but that would also explain how Kris knows how to do this and already has this whole setup with the birdcage prepared before Chapter 1. Regardless, this wouldn't really make sense if we consider us, the player, to be the one possessing Kris via their soul. We obviously weren't controlling Kris before the game, so why would Kris be ripping their soul out before we showed up? Many people have used this as evidence for the theory that Kris has multiple souls, or at the very least multiple people possessing them, but I've always really disliked that theory. Nothing against anyone who believes it, I just feel like the game really seems to be focusing on the relationship between us and Kris, and to me, throwing in some third entity would just muddy that dynamic and lessen its impact, as well as take away from Kris as a character if you're implying that a third entity is the one responsible for Kris doing things like, slashing their mom's tires or opening up a dark fountain. For the longest time, I had no idea how to reconcile the idea of Kris throwing their soul in the birdcage before the game with the idea that we, the player, alone are controlling them. But just recently, while watching another theory video, I suddenly had an idea. What if before the events of the game, Kris was briefly controlled as a sort of test run for our connection to the world of Deltarune? Let me explain. First, we're going with the popular assumption that Gaster is the voice who speaks to us on Twitter and during the Garnermaker segment, because he absolutely is, but I'm not explaining all that here. Let's also assume that, like many speculate, Gaster is the one connecting us to the world of Deltarune. He's the one who made this survey program and is handling things like our save files and just generally making sure that we are able to play the game. Judging from the Garnermaker segment and the mysterious second voice interrupting him, it can be assumed that Gaster was trying to have us control the vessel, not Kris. But what if we were originally going to control Kris? The idea I'm presenting is that before we were connected to Deltarune's world, Gaster himself briefly controlled Kris using the Red Soul in order to make sure that whatever crazy interdimensional tech he's got going on here would work for when we use it. A test run of possessing Kris. However, during this test run, Kris already started to rebel against being controlled, ripping the soul out and throwing it in the birdcage like they do in-game, causing the stain on the carpet. Seeing that his initial pick for our vessel wasn't really working the way he had wanted it to, Gaster decided to create a new vessel instead, which would serve the same purpose and even look a lot like Kris, but without the ability to disobey. Now, this theory definitely makes a lot of assumptions, and I am not at all claiming that this is 100% soundproof. Again, we don't even know if these details surrounding the birdcage even matter, but if they do, I think this explains some of the confusion without straying into third entity territory. It would make sense that Gaster would want to test this ability to control a vessel via the soul before he hooks us up to it, though it's unclear why he would originally want us to control specifically Kris. Maybe it's because Kris is the human from the prophecy, but when they proved to not be as chill about the whole possession thing as he had hoped, he decided to try and create a replacement who could fill the same role. It's unclear if the appearance of the heroes from the prophecy matters at all, but if it does, then that could also explain why the vessel seems to be fashioned after Kris specifically. Now, obviously, this theory still doesn't address one of the biggest mysteries surrounding the vessel and our connection to Kris, and that's of course who the second voice even is. Who are they, and why did they decide to screw Gaster over by making us control Kris instead? This theory would mean that they were in fact reverting the experiment back to how it was originally intended, but I'll be honest and say that I do not have any answers regarding this part. I am not trying to make some all-encompassing theory here, I'm just presenting an idea I had. Regardless, I think that this main idea of Gaster doing a test run on Kris and then creating the vessel when they rebelled is surprisingly strong. Again, if we're assuming Kris did in fact rip their soul out before we got here. There's also the possibility that it wasn't Gaster, but perhaps the second voice themselves who did this test run on Kris. Maybe while Gaster was setting up the whole Goner Maker thing, the second voice was secretly testing controlling Kris, which would explain how they were able to just suddenly switch us to being Kris instead of the vessel. They had already done this before. Again, no idea why they're doing this, but it's a possibility. There's also the possibility that Gaster never meant for us to actually control Kris and was merely using them as a test subject of some sort before fashioning the Goner Maker after them. There's also definitely the question of why Gaster would have controlled Kris briefly and then not just reset the world or something before we showed up, something he is clearly able to do in some manner. But I feel like that question could also be asked regarding his interactions with Jevil and Spamton. Like I said before, this theory is very simple, that's basically it. I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Do you think any part of this is plausible? Did I miss anything? Let me know! This is my first time making my own Deltarune theory like this, despite being unhealthily obsessed with this game and all of the lore and theory surrounding it for like 2 years straight now. Like, I genuinely cannot put into words how much I think about this game and what it has in store, and oh my god, I need Chapter 3 right now, I cannot take this any longer. This is also my first video on this channel since rebranding it, which is really exciting. I've had all of this prepared for a long time, but I couldn't really think of anything I wanted to make a video about that people hadn't already discussed, so it just lay dormant. I definitely will be posting more in the future, though it might be quite a while until my next video. I am not going to lie and say that I'm gonna have consistent uploads. This channel also isn't going to be focused on Deltarune in particular, but considering it's by far my main interest, like it's not even close, I will absolutely be talking about it more, especially once more chapters of the game are out. So if you want to see that, consider subscribing. That's all from me for now. Bye!